Now, as you've probably already seen, and if you haven't, I'll include a link in the description below, the first trailer for Star Wars Resistance, the new animated show, has dropped, and it looks, well, interesting is the word I would choose, but not for good reasons. In fact, the feeling I get from our first minute-long glimpse of it seems to suggest it's going to be aimed almost entirely at children, and very young ones at that, if the goofy antics of our new main character and the overall tone of the trailer is a good indicator of things to come, which I would imagine it would be, or why put it in the trailer? And if my initial assumptions here are correct, and of course they might not be, it means my biggest fear for this show and Star Wars animation in general, that it would be a further regression in terms of quality of animation and the age group targeted, which Rebels certainly was when compared to the Clone Wars, is being realized, and that we're about to take yet another step backwards with Resistance. And before I go on, let me stress that these are only my first impressions. I obviously have yet to see an actual episode, so who knows if the trailer is going to be indicative of the actual show, though again, that not being the case would make no sense. And no, there's nothing inherently wrong with aiming a show directly at a younger audience, and that it may seem silly for an adult such as myself to complain that a cartoon isn't being tailored for me. But that being said, what seems to be getting ignored here is that there is already a huge following for Star Wars animated shows amongst the more adult crowd, so why make a show that, at first glance anyway, looks like it's going to risk turning away that crowd just in the hopes of luring in the young? And I get that Disney and Lucasfilm likely see this new show as an entry point to Star Wars for the young, but I think ignoring the older crowd that, as the recent announcement of the return of the Clone Wars proves, is eager for more animated Star Wars is a big mistake. Then again, maybe this new show won't be quite as bad as it looks, because I remember when I saw the first promotions for Rebels, when they introduced the characters in these 3-minute shorts, and I had a bad feeling about that too, but Rebels turned out to be a pretty good show that would push the envelope from time to time with the themes and stories they gave us. It also didn't entirely shy away from violence, which, like it or not, needs to be there to help us understand the stakes and the real danger that is being faced by our heroes. Now, what Rebels did in those regards wasn't anywhere near on the same levels the Clone Wars was willing to go to, but I always felt Rebels walked that fine line between being too childish for adults and too mature for children quite well. And I certainly understand the need to create a show that appealed to a very large audience, one that anyone of any age could get into and enjoy. And it very much makes sense for all the Star Wars fans who are parents out there, that you would give them a show that they could watch and enjoy personally, and were comfortable showing to their kids, and might just help get their kids hooked on Star Wars, and not to mention, give the whole family something to share and enjoy. And again, I could be wrong about this show, and it might end up being great, but the animation style and quality, although not horrible, is certainly a downgrade from Rebels, which, as I mentioned earlier, was a big downgrade from how good the animation was in the Clone Wars. And what really kind of saddens me here is that Star Wars used to be about setting the benchmark for others to strive after. The original trilogy, for example, changed the movie industry forever. It raised the bar for what movies could even be, and to this day, nothing has again captured that same kind of magic. No other film franchise has completely captivated an entire generation like the original Star Wars did. Others have come close, but nothing has quite matched it. And even when you look at the prequels, you realize Lucas tried to raise the bar yet again and set a new standard for what could be done with CGI. And although many of course feel the over-reliance on CGI was one of the downfalls of the prequels, it can't be denied that once again Lucas tried to, and did, usher in a new era for the way movies could be made. Once again Star Wars was the trendsetter, and that was what everyone else was trying to mimic, and eventually led to movies like Avatar, which, arguably, took the ideas for all CGI worlds and characters that Lucas was going for, and pretty much perfected it. And though I certainly wouldn't consider myself a cartoon connoisseur, The Clone Wars, and especially the later seasons of the show, was the most impressive animation I'd personally ever seen out of a cartoon or animated show on television. There was clearly a good amount of money being put into each and every episode to make the show worthy of the Star Wars name, to once again push boundaries about what could be done. And it's interesting to note that the main reason we never got to see the live-action Star Wars show called Underground is because Lucas said it would have been way too expensive to make it look the way he thought it needed to look to be considered Star Wars. And although Rebels didn't spend the money that the Clone Wars obviously did, it at least tried very hard to give that Star Wars aesthetic or feel, and in my opinion, it worked and worked well most of the time. It unfortunately may not have been the best animation ever, and it didn't take any steps forward in terms of what could be done, but it looked and felt like Star Wars to me. And I also very much appreciated how often they paid homage to Ralph McQuarrie, who was responsible for many of the designs used in the original trilogy. However, this new trailer for Resistance not only didn't give that Star Wars vibe or feel, it also didn't look very impressive in its own right. Again, I'm no expert in animation, but it looked cheap to me. And it's sad to think that the Clone Wars animated series came out 10 years ago now, and yet looks so much better than what we're getting today. I'm truly confused as to why Disney doesn't put the money needed into a show to truly catch the attention of not only Star Wars fans, but those beyond the fandom or those who might not otherwise watch a Star Wars animated show. And I'm not trying to be totally pessimistic here, but if this trailer was the best they could come up with to get us fans excited and to lure in those on the fence about the show, it doesn't give me much hope. And clearly, I'm not alone as the ratio of likes to dislikes on the trailer begins to show. And honestly, what I think is going to happen here is that this show really will just be aimed at kids, and there won't be many redeeming qualities for those adult fans who watch it, people like myself who try to keep up on all things canon. Though I do think the trade-off is going to be that the new live-action show that will be on Disney's pay streaming service will be aimed almost strictly at adults, and I suppose that's a trade I'm going to have to make, even though, quite honestly, I'm a big fan of animated Star Wars, and I think there's a lot of untapped potential there as the Clone Wars, especially the later seasons, really started to show us. Because some of the best Star Wars I've ever seen was actually in the Clone Wars, and if you're someone who has never watched it, I would highly recommend giving it a try, or a second try if maybe you started to watch it once upon a time and just didn't find it to your liking, because it actually gets much better as it goes along, and starts to get really good probably about the midpoint of Season 3. In closing here, I don't want to say I've given up all hope on the show, and of course I'm still going to watch it because it is canon, but this was not the trailer I was looking and hoping for. I get that they want to bring in the younger crowd, but it seems like a mistake to forget about the older crowd in the process. An older crowd who, in some cases, have loved and enjoyed 2 previous Star Wars animated shows now, and wanted that trend of something they could also enjoy to continue. And yes, again, I realize I'm a grown man complaining that a cartoon isn't tailored enough to me, and that I haven't even seen it yet. But this is yet another head-scratching decision on the part of Disney and Lucasfilm on many levels if this show really does turn out to be strictly aimed at children. Because you clearly have a large group of fans eager for more animated Star Wars, and this is what you give them? A show that seems to want to exclude them? Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now, I'm very curious to hear your impressions of this new trailer for Resistance. Are you excited for it? Has this killed your excitement for it? And what do you think about the animation style? Whatever it might be, let me know in the comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.